A salon in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. The year is 1796. Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia for 34 years, one of the most powerful rulers in European history, is about to die. She is 67 years old, has just suffered a stroke, and lies unconscious. Court physicians surround the imperial bed, but there is nothing they can do. The following day, on the 17th of November, she will die. And then a rumor will begin to circulate. Not about her military conquests, not about the territorial expansion that transformed Russia into a superpower, not about her reforms or patronage of the arts. The rumor will be about something far darker, something so shocking that it would span centuries and become one of the most whispered stories in European history. They say the Empress's death was not natural. They say she died during an intimate act with a horse, crushed when the animal suspended above her by a system of pulleys catastrophically failed. This story would spread like wildfire throughout Europe, published in clandestine pamphlets, repeated in aristocratic salons, and eventually become so widespread that even today, more than 200 years later, millions of people still believe it to be true. But what really happened in that Russian palace? How did a woman born as an obscure German princess become one of history's most powerful and controversial rulers? And why does this particular story about her death persist when so many other royal scandals have been forgotten? Today we dive deeply into the life of Catherine the Great, the dark secrets of the Russian court, and finally reveal the truth behind the legend that Europe tried to hide. Catherine was not born to rule an empire. She was born Sophie Friederike Gustav von Anhalt-Zerbst on the 2nd day of May in the year 1729 in Stettin, Prussia. She was the daughter of a minor German prince, a family without real wealth or significant political influence. But at 14 years of age, destiny knocked at her door. She was selected as a possible bride for Peter, heir to the Russian throne. No one knew then that this arranged marriage would become one of the most dysfunctional and dangerous in European royal history. In the year 1745, young Sophie traveled across frozen Europe to St. Petersburg. There, she converted to Russian Orthodoxy, taking the new name Catherine, and married Peter in an elaborate ceremony witnessed by the entire imperial court. It seemed like a fairy tale, a poor princess becoming the future empress of a vast empire. But the reality was a nightmare. Peter was possibly one of the worst imaginable choices for a husband or ruler. He was emotionally immature, obsessed with Prussian military toys, and according to court reports, possibly impotent during the early years of marriage. But worse than his physical inadequacies was his open contempt for his wife. Peter humiliated Catherine publicly, ostentatiously kept mistresses, and made it clear that he considered his foreign wife a burden. For Catherine, a young woman isolated in a foreign country where she barely spoke the language, the situation was desperate. But she did not surrender. Instead, she began a meticulous project of survival and eventually conquest of power. She learned Russian fluently, something her husband never bothered to do. She studied Russian politics and history obsessively. And crucially, she began to cultivate allies. For 17 long years, Catherine lived as Grand Duchess, officially the heir's wife, but in reality marginalized and frequently threatened. During this period, she had multiple love affairs. This was not merely a search for pleasure, it was political survival. In a court where her husband despised her and where she had no formal power, intimate relationships were a way to build alliances, gain powerful protectors, and eventually produce an heir that would secure her position. Her son Paul was born, officially Peter's son, but with real paternity debated by historians. But regardless of biology, Paul was recognized as the heir, giving Catherine the indispensable role as mother of the future Tsar. When Empress Elizabeth died in the year 1761, Peter finally ascended to the throne as Peter III, and he immediately proved to be exactly the disaster everyone feared. In an act of political insanity, he completely reversed Russian foreign policy, making peace with Prussia, despite Russia winning the 7 Years' War. Military officers who had fought and bled for years were furious. Peter then offended the Orthodox Church with abrupt secularization proposals, alienating Russia's most powerful institution. And finally, he committed a fatal error. He publicly humiliated Catherine, threatening to divorce her, exile her, and even imprison her in a convent. He did not realize that for 17 years, she had woven a network of allies, waiting for exactly this moment. In the year 1762, just 6 months after Peter assumed the throne, a coup was executed with surgical precision. Catherine, supported by loyal military guards, especially the Izmaelski regiment, acted. Peter was deposed, forced to abdicate in a document he signed with trembling hands. And then days later, he died in custody. Officially, the cause was a complicated hemorrhoid, but nobody believed it. Peter was almost certainly murdered by guards, with at least Catherine's tacit knowledge. She had just done the unthinkable. A foreign woman, without a drop of Russian blood in her veins, had overthrown an emperor and taken the throne of Europe's largest empire. She was 33 years old and was just getting started. Catherine's reign would fundamentally transform Russia. Territorially, she was a conqueror on a scale that rivaled Peter the Great. She waged 2 successful wars against the Ottoman Empire, annexing Crimea in the year 1783 and establishing Russian dominion over the Black Sea. She participated in 3 partitions of Poland, swallowing vast western territories. Under her command, Russia expanded by more than 500,000 square kilometers. But territorial conquests were only part of the transformation. Catherine reinvented herself as an Enlightenment empress, corresponding with Voltaire and Diderot, patronizing the arts, founding museums and schools. St. Petersburg transformed from a provincial capital into a cultural rival to Paris. But there was a dark side. When Yemelyan Pugachev led a massive rebellion of serfs and Cossacks between the years 1773 and 1775, seriously threatening Catherine's throne, she responded with brutality that shocked even her allies. Pugachev was captured, horribly tortured, and dismembered alive in a public execution in Moscow. Thousands of rebels were hanged along roads as warnings, and after crushing the rebellion, Catherine abandoned any pretense of reforming serfdom, instead expanding nobles' powers over virtually enslaved serfs. And then there was Catherine's personal life, an aspect that would generate explosive controversy. During 34 years of reign, Catherine had a succession of favorites, lovers who received titles, vast properties, and tremendous political influence. Grigory Orlov, one of the coup's organizers, became the first great favorite. Then came Grigory Pumpkin, a brilliant general and possibly Catherine's secret husband, certainly the love of her life and political partner for more than a decade. And finally, a succession of progressively younger men, culminating in Platon Zubov, 40 years younger than the aging empress. For 18th century society, this was scandalous. Not because monarchs had lovers, kings routinely did, but because it was a woman, openly exercising sexual power. Women were expected to be passive, controlled, modest. Catherine was powerful, clearly commanding relationships, choosing and discarding lovers as she wished. This defied the natural order of things for many contemporaries. The propaganda began during her lifetime. Rival courts, particularly revolutionary France, which Catherine despised and fought against, produced obscene pamphlets portraying her as an insatiable nymphomaniac. Pornographic caricatures circulated, showing her in an increasingly exaggerated and impossible situations. This was an established genre of political warfare. Marie Antoinette was similarly attacked. But for Catherine, the attacks were particularly virulent because there was a core of truth. She really did have multiple known lovers to which elaborate fictions could be attached. And then she died, the 16th of November, in the year 1796. Sudden stroke, found unconscious in her private bathroom, coma for 20 hours, death witnessed by doctors, family, courtiers, body embalmed according to Orthodox ritual, state funeral, burial in the Peter and Paul Cathedral. Everything meticulously documented. But the rumors started anyway.
First whispers, then pamphlets in France, then gossip books, the horse story. Details varied, but the essence remained. The Empress died during an encounter with an animal. Equipment failed. She was crushed. The story was perfectly constructed, shocking enough to be memorable, sexual enough to be titillating, humiliating enough to destroy a powerful woman's legacy, and vague enough in details that it couldn't be definitively refuted for those who wanted to believe. Why did the rumor catch on and persist when so many other royal scandals were forgotten? Multiple factors. Catherine had no powerful defenders after death. Her son Paul hated her, blaming her for his father's death. He would not defend her reputation. She was a polarizing figure, hated by conservatives, French monarchists, religious moralists. The story confirmed prejudices. Powerful women are sexually deviant. Those who transgress norms meet grotesque ends. There is cosmic justice in a proud ruler being destroyed by carnal appetites. It was a moral lesson, packaged as scandalous gossip. Through the 19th century, the rumor solidified. It appeared in popular books, was referenced in literature, became common knowledge among educated people, despite not appearing in serious academic histories, because historians who checked primary sources saw it was false. But academic history and popular knowledge existed in separate spheres. Most people didn't read academic, historical treatises. They heard stories, read pamphlets, absorbed popular culture. And in popular culture, Catherine was the woman who died with a horse. The 20th century brought mass media, but not truth. The rumor appeared in films, television shows, popular books, and then came the internet explosion. Memes, viral posts, videos. Millions of people learning about Catherine not through books, but through online jokes. Catherine the Great, the one who died with a horse. It became a fact that everyone knows. Common knowledge, self-evident truth. Except that it is completely, absolutely, demonstrably false. So what is the truth? The truth is that Catherine died of a stroke in the Winter Palace, surrounded by doctors and family after 34 years of extraordinary reign. The truth is that we have extensive and reliable documentation of her death. The truth is that the horse story was invented by political enemies, probably in French Revolution, specifically to destroy the legacy of a woman who was too powerful, too successful, too sexual for the comfort of patriarchal society. The truth is that Catherine was one of the most effective rulers in European history, enormously expanding Russian territory, transforming St. Petersburg into a cultural capital, patronizing the Enlightenment, and keeping the empire stable for more than 30 decades. She was complex, contradictory, capable of Enlightenment idealism and autocratic brutality, romantic and pragmatic, cultured and ruthless. She deserves to be remembered for the reality of her life and reign, not for political pornography invented to destroy her reputation. That the rumor persists more than 200 years later is not testimony to its truth, but to the power of propaganda, the persistence of misogyny, and the ease with which society accepts and perpetuates lies about powerful women who defy norms. Catherine's story is a warning. Reputations can be assassinated by well-constructed fictions, and once a lie takes root in popular culture, it is almost impossible to eradicate it, even with mountains of contrary evidence. Catherine the Great deserves better.